A mother and two young children are brutally slain in their family farmhouse. That's just the start of the story, as this is a tale that would expose a State Department who would be decried for their handling of this situation and their lack of intervention. This also questions the sentencing process and justification of penalties imposed to a man who lied about his involvement of the death of a woman and her children. Beyond that, this tragic story also has a family member filing a formal complaint after being personally attacked by a state prosecutor, which resulted in him not being able to provide his victim impact statement. And finally, there is the hidden identity of a child against his own wishes due to the overzealous usage of suppression orders. All I can say about this case is strap in and get ready for a ride that will no doubt enrage you and have you shaking your head and shedding tears as we try to make sense of the Hillier Triple murder here on Just Lawful.
Adelaide is the perfect place to set a horror story. You know why all those films and books are always set in sleepy conservative towns? Because sleepy conservative towns are where those things happen. Exorcism, omens, shining, poltergeists. Adelaide is Amityville, or Salem, and things here go bump in the night.
Before we begin this next case, we want to just advise that some of the themes and content that we cover may make some of our listeners uncomfortable. Due to its sensitive nature, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners are advised that the following program contains the names and references to people who have died. If you find anything we discuss distressing, please make use of the following support resources: the Victim Support Service on 8231 5656 or 1800 182 368. The Domestic Violence Crisis Service on 1300 782 200, the Domestic Violence Gateway Service on 1800 800 098, or the National Sexual Assault, Domestic and Family Violence Counselling Service on 1800-RESPECT. Again, we recognise that this is a sad and tragic tale. I'm going to start by introducing, of course, the man who's my co-host and wouldn't be possible without him, Sean Fuster. Sean, without going into the actual details that we'll most certainly investigate and unpack, I just want to understand from you right now your thoughts and, more importantly, the feelings that are stirred up within you when I say the Hillier Triple murder.
Trauma. I've got a headache right now radiating behind my right eye, going all the way back to the back of my skull and down my spine as I think about this case, because I've said before, every case stays with you to some degree. This case is a grand mal nightmare for me. It takes elements of other cases that I covered that affected me very deeply, that left me with literal trauma, and combines them into one. We're talking about domestic violence. We're talking about violence to children. We're talking about silencing people. We're talking about a government department that I'd already crossed swords with by this point in a way that left me in a psychologist's chair. This is not going to be easy for me at all, but it needs to be said because it isn't over. That's the worst thing about this. It's not over yet.
It's fair to say this has had an impact on you, and a quite severe impact. You just made mention there that this left you in a psychologist's chair.
Well, not this one. The one before it. This brought all those feelings back up again. Just when I had tried to heal from the first blow, this blow comes.
So just talk me through that. So if you know that first incident where you crossed your swords with this department left you in that state, stepping into this, and maybe not right away, but as this unfolds, knowing that this is going to potentially put you back in that same situation, how did you go about that? How did you prepare yourself? What was your process to be able to put yourself back in that state?
There wasn't one. There wasn't time to think about it when it all started. And as we'll see, and I think it's best that we develop this chronologically.
Sure.
There were things that I did, and I think they're going to surprise you. You know me better than most, and I still think this is going to surprise you, because this one predates you and I.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not surprised that I will be surprised, if that makes sense, because knowing the graphic nature and the content of what this case is all about. And as I said, I don't know how you could prepare. So if you said you didn't have time or the ability to set yourself up in that manner, I'm not sure how you would do that. So I look forward to that in the most optimistic way of unpacking that, if that's possible under these circumstances.
Well, I'm still here. I'm still sitting upright to talk about it. So it all ended well in one sense.
Well, you certainly traversed it. Obviously, you're here, which is good. Look, we're not going to talk much more about this at this stage. We are going to get straight into this. So, as we said, we're on to our next series, and thank you for those who stayed with us on the first series, the Jack Hanley story. That was some amazing responses we got from that. So thank you for everyone who responded and went along that journey. We are going to step into our second case here, the Hillier Triple murder. Look, it's fair to say even just the title alone, Sean, sort of sends some shivers down my spine. Just that title alone, there's nothing good that comes from a name like that. Let's start at the beginning. Let's put some reference around this and let's work out where this is. So Hillier, it's a western suburb of the small town of Gawler. Gawler is actually the oldest country town in the Australian mainland. Funnily enough, it was established in 1839. It's still South Australia's largest and most significant historic town. It's located approximately 42 kilometres north of Adelaide. It's right on the edge of the metropolitan area, but it's almost all but incorporated into the metro sprawl these days, if you like, of our northernmost suburbs. For reference, for those who may be listening around the world, it's almost like a gateway, if you like. It's in the wine-producing area by the Barossa Valley, some of South Australia's best wine country up there. And in 2016, which is the latest sort of population figures, it has around about 23,500 residents. So, by all accounts, not a huge small town, if you like. Initially settled as a depot town for travellers, provided equipment, supplies, and a resting point for settlers who were moving throughout the state into more rural locations. This also included the establishment of some numerous hotels and lodgings along Murray Street, which remains its main street to this day. But more importantly than all of that historic importance, there's a really significant event that occurred here in the late 1970s. Sean, I just wonder if you can pick for me and for our listeners what that really significant event may have been in the late 1970s.
You're a jerk. You're a jerk sometimes. I'm from Gawler. I was born in Gawler in the Gawler Hospital in 1979.
I wasn't going to give the actual... I made it sort of vague for you, but the late 70s, 79, great.
Post-Star Wars.
Post-Star Wars.
Post-Star Wars. That's where I came into the world. So I grew up in Gawler. I was aware of Hillier growing up. At that point, Hillier wasn't even a suburb. Hillier was farmland.
Yeah.
There's a park out that way called Clonley Park where my friends and I used to go a lot. As children for playgrounds, as older kids to sit around and talk and, throw rocks in the water and all sorts of stuff. Hillier has grown as Gawler has grown.
Yeah.
I was aware of Hillier growing up,
Yeah.
but in those days it was just farmland.
Yeah.
It was on the other side of this park called Clonley Park that my friends and I used to go to as kids and as teenagers. As Gawler developed and got basically too big for its population, some of the roads started getting chopped off by development, by Big W, by stores going in. The population expanded outwards, and Hillier converted, as most farmland eventually does, to the scythe of progress and became another suburb.
But we're talking predominantly as sort of, if you like, country, rural, beautiful sitting town, countryside, that sort of...
Oh, absolutely. Look, Gawler from the outside is pretty as a picture. Inside, all small towns have their problems. I didn't have the best experience growing up in Gawler.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. You are a Gawler boy. Give us a flavour of what it was like growing up in Gawler. At this point, obviously, through the 80s, etc., and into the 90s, which would have been your time there. Give us a flavour of what would, I guess, Hillier and Gawler by extension.
I didn't have the best experience of Gawler.
Sure.
I found Gawler to be very much a town of have and have-nots.
Okay.
The street I grew up on in particular, we were probably one of the few nice houses in a very rough area.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to talk about the quality of the people. That's to talk about the quality of the domiciles.
Absolutely.
Lots of what we then called housing trust houses. Lots of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people who were lower socioeconomic or near poverty.
Yeah.
And then you had different areas of Gawler which were rich as anything.
Yeah.
Old mansions, really nice new houses. It was a very, I can't say it any better than have and have nots kind of situation. As development occurred, that only increased.
Of course.
There was also the fact that Gawler being, as you say, right on the edge of the suburban sprawl and the gateway to the Barossa Valley meant that a lot of people who lived in the Barossa who had businesses that failed, farms that failed, would move into Gawler.
Yep.
And a lot of people from the northern suburbs, Elizabeth, Salisbury, who had to leave those areas for reasons of violence or crime, would move into Gawler. I've tended to refer to that as opposing fronts of cold front bitterness coming into the one place.
It's a melting pot. What you're
Very
talking about.
much a melting pot.
A very real melting pot of sort of communities, different backgrounds, different socio-economic environments coming together there.
Yeah, and Gawler doesn't like that being talked about. When I was a young, starting out journalism student, I went to write a story about a particular situation in Gawler, and I actually had a senior figure in Gawler politics at the time reach across and turn my tape recorder off.
Right.
And tell me that if I persisted in this line of questioning, he was going to let my parents and my grandparents know that I was being disrespectful and life would be very difficult for all of us in this town, and then switch my tape recorder back on.
So
I was 15.
So media persecution even back then, Sean.
Absolutely. Look, like I say, Gawler has an image, and I'm sure for a lot of people, I can think of friends I grew up with who are going to be listening to this right now going, Sean's banging on about Gawler again. One of their wives in particular will be very upset with me saying this. She loves the town, and to those who love it, great. My experience, hey, I said I was born after Star Wars. It was Tatooine to me.
And as you said, it is just your experience because the haves and the have-nots, that's not any different to any country town.
That's right.
Any suburban sort of residence, if you like, there's always the haves, the have-nots. There's those which fall on the right side of the tracks, those on the wrong side of the tracks. It's that melting pot. What we get a flavour of, though, is Gawler is any country town.
Any country town, any mixture of demographics.
Yeah.
It's just that this is the country town that we're going to get more complaints about than anything else in this episode.
Well, those complaints aside, I think that's a really good foundation to understand where this occurred. Really shortly, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the incident and we're going to start to unpack. And the way you and I have gone about this, we're going to try and break down for you the first 24 hours. And we're going to do it from perspective of understanding what it was like to navigate this in your world, Sean, as a reporter, while dealing with facts, the courts, the police, the families involved, and try to make some semblance of what is just a horrific situation. Sean, as I said, we're going to go through and try and unpack the first 24 hours. Look, it's fair to say that this situation's case, and look, these murders ripped at the heart of this community. It's also fair to say that little was really initially known in those first 24 hours of the case, and look, they were nothing short of frenetic in the manner and the amount, and I guess, the details of the information you were trying to gather and you were getting at the time. I'm going to run through chronologically what I know, and I want you to sort of fill in the gaps for me if you could do that and help me out here. So we know that Monday, May 30th, 2016, you're advised that 3 murders have occurred, and the bodies of these murder victims have been located at 1:30 p.m. at a Hillier farmhouse. At that point, you're assigned to attend court the next day on the Tuesday morning in regard to this. So at this stage, what information, beyond what I've just said, did you have about this?
So I knew that the arrested man was 30 years old.
Okay.
We had a suspicion of what his name was based on scuttlebutt, but no confirmation of that.
So talk to me about on the suspicion of why is that?
Police reporters go out and handle this side of things. The court reporter, as you said, doesn't get involved until court's involved.
Gotcha.
So the police reporters had heard police officers speaking. Maybe they had sources they could hit up, people they could rely on and say, what is this guy's name? Can we get some sort of idea?
But nothing you could concretely go, this is it.
Nothing we could concretely go with. And also there's a belief that you don't name people who are going to appear in court until they appear in court.
Right, okay.
What if it's the wrong name?
Sure.
What if it's let's go, for example, your surname. I see your surname turn up in the case lists every night. There's a whole crew of Panozzos out there who are involved in all sorts of allegedly shady dealings.
They may or may not allegedly have some family heritage, I don't know.
They may or may not.
There's a few of us out there, I don't know.
We can neither confirm nor deny. But to say that if there was another Daniel Panozzo out there, and I said it was you appearing in court tomorrow and it's not you, That's an instant lawsuit.
Yeah, sure.
Why not just wait?
Okay.
Wait until they appear in court. Just as a sidebar, that's why we always report a person's age and their suburb of residence as well, in case there are two people with similar names.
Identifying factors.
That's
Gotcha.
right. So we knew that the alleged killer was 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that the first of the victims, the mother, was 29 years old.
Okay.
We knew that one of the children was 6, one of the children was 5.
Right.
We didn't know genders.
Okay.
We didn't know names.
Sure.
All we knew is that they died at the farmhouse, that they'd been found at 1:30 p.m.
Yeah.
That's as much information as we had to go on.
So that's not a lot to start with.
Not a lot. You could put up together other things by the fact that there were people who were claiming to be family members coming in and out of the house on that Monday night.
Okay.
Speaking to media crews as they went past, leave me alone. I just want to mourn my sister. I just want to mourn my niece and nephew. But no concrete information at that point. Again, nothing that you would be prepared to nail your flag to and say, this is what happened.
Okay.
Because that's what court is for.
Sure. So look, with that in mind, so we get to the next morning.
Well, actually, there was one other thing that I should bring up here. I had seen a photo of the alleged murderer.
Okay.
One of our photographers had gotten a shot of him as he'd been brought in a car. It's a very distinctive photo. He's leaning back with his head, looking down with his eyes. He's wearing a blue Tyvek jumpsuit, the sort of blue jumpsuit they give you when they've taken your clothes for forensic analysis, which happens a lot. And you could see that he had neck tattoos.
Okay, so what's the significance of that?
Well, 3 skulls. 1 skull, 2 skull, 3 skull across. It's almost like a 3 wise monkeys of skulls. See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil.
I want to pull you up on this point, Sean, and,
Sure.
and I feel I need to, and simply because in our last case that we covered, the Jack Hanley case, we talked about, that prejudice or preconditioned idea or thought process around tattoos. So I want to be really clear about why you're bringing up the fact that this gentleman had tattoos.
Simply because it was an identifying marker. This guy was wrapped up in a blue Tyvek jumpsuit with the hood up. Couldn't see much of him.
Right.
His face was at a weird angle. There was no way of positively identifying who he was.
Okay.
But those 3 tattoos could turn out to be something that we could identify with.
Okay.
It's distinctive. It's different. Wasn't making a judgment call. Oh, he's got tattoos, therefore he's a killer.
Okay.
I was making the call of that's something to look out for to make sure that it's the right person. Again, differentiating the Daniel Panozzo that's sitting in front of me from a Panozzo that's appearing in court.
Sure.
What is different about this person that I'm looking for vis-a-vis everybody else who may have similar names?
And look, I just wanted to be really clear for myself and for you and our listeners that we're not saying that the tattoos are a prejudice situation
Not at all.
or biasing our opinion of this person one way or another. You're simply saying that it was being used as a tool to possibly identify him more correctly or accurately down the track.
That's right. I'm going to have to look at this guy in court the next day.
Sure.
I want to have an idea of what face I'm looking for.
Okay. All right. So at that point, little to go on. We know that there's victims. We've got ages. We don't know necessarily genders of some of them. We have possibly a name of an offender, but we can't clarify or guarantee that we've got that right yet. And we've got this image of this person who's been brought in by police that's got these neck tattoos. That's all you've got right now.
That's everything right now.
All right. The next day, the Tuesday morning, you're going to head out to the Elizabeth Magistrates Court because you're going to go out and see what is this about. Once again, at this point, despite the fact that you're investigating 3 murders here, horrific by nature in itself. What are your feelings about this going into this right now?
At this point in time, I'm not really thinking a lot more other than this is damn awful.
Yeah.
Regardless of who inevitably is found guilty of this crime, whether it's this person who's already been arrested or someone else down the track, this is just going to be really unpleasant.
Yeah.
Really unpleasant. A woman has died. Her kids have died.
Yeah.
They're young. There's no good that's going to come of this.
Look, I'd love to, and I'm not going to do it now, I'd love to circle back to something like this moment in future episodes to go, how is it knowing that you've got a 30-minute drive ahead of you from Adelaide out to Elizabeth, with that in the back of your mind to go, I'm here to do my job, to get the facts, to be able to advertise that piece of what this is and communicate that to our our public out there. How do you do that knowing the other side to that is 3 people have lost their lives here? As I said, I want you to hang on to that, and I've probably just set that up, and everyone's probably screaming at me right now, how could you ask that and not let him answer it? I want to come back to that one day, okay? And we will definitely. That's one of the things.
It's a longer answer.
Absolutely, and I know it is. So we will at some point circle back to that process that you put yourself through. So you make that drive. You get there to Elizabeth Magistrates Court, and I want you at this stage just to describe the scene here, what unfolds, what occurs now.
As soon as I get out of the car, I notice that the courthouse is open.
Yep.
But there's a large group of Aboriginal Australians out the front.
Mm-hmm.
Very large group.
Okay.
They are upset.
Okay.
They are distraught.
Yep.
Some of them are actually hysterical.
Mm.
And there are a couple of sheriff's officers, the officers who guard the courthouse, out the front, holding their hands up, trying to talk to them, trying to reach them, trying to get through to them.
Okay.
It's not a good scene to walk on straight away.
Yeah.
Sheriff's officers do a phenomenal job here in South Australia. They were massively outnumbered. At the same time, this family was clearly distraught.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of watching from the sidelines, trying to figure out what's going on, who's involved, what's actually happening. One of the family members turns around and says, "You're that guy from the newspaper."
Okay.
All right. So they approach me and say, "You're the guy from the newspaper, right?" I said, "Yes, that's me." "We're her family. We can't get in and find out what's going on."
So right now, now you're talking to members of the deceased family.
That's right. "We're her family. We can't find out what's going on. We
Okay.
can't get in."
Yeah.
All right. I tell you what, I said, "I'll go in and find out what I can and come back out to you." I'm taking a bit of a risk here. I'm hoping that these are the right people, but at the very least, maybe this will help diffuse the situation a bit. So I go into court, I go inside, I go to the custody court, and I speak to the sheriff's officers, and I find out that the man accused of these murders will be appearing in court, but he won't be appearing in court until 2:15.
So this is the morning.
We're at 9 o'clock in the morning here.
Yeah, right.
9 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be hours. Police detectives are still interviewing him. Major crime is still doing their investigations. 2:15 is the earliest he's going to be up. And his name is Stephen Graham Peat.
So at this point, you are advised of the accused's name.
I am informally advised of the accused's name. Again, don't report names until they've appeared in court.
Sure.
But right now, I've got this name.
Okay.
I know that this name is the name that the sheriff's officers are waiting to be brought from the cells into the court.
Okay.
So my next step is to say, well, I've got this name,
Yep.
I've got this photo, and I've got this tattoo.
Okay.
I can't report any of this right now because it's going to potentially cause problems down the track. But what I can do is ring back to the advertiser newsroom and say, guys, this is the name I've been given. Someone with some decent Googling skills and someone who's got some Facebook access, get online and try to find this guy. Let's see what we can find out straight away about him. What is on social media? What is on the internet? Is he on LinkedIn? Is there a resume floating around somewhere? Is he on the board of any schools? Is he a member of a church community? Does he turn up in a PDF for a sporting club? What can we find about him in the next couple of hours while we've got this name but can't use it publicly? So
at this point, we ring back to get some electronic investigation happening.
Yeah.
Maybe put Mark Zuckerberg to some decent use for a change. Sorry, a terrible joke, I know, but so at that point, that's all you can really do with what you've got.
That's right.
So you take what you now know. So what you can't report is obviously the name and all that. You now know when this accused is going to face court. So you go back outside, presumably?
The family are all sitting in the courtyard out the front of the courthouse, and I approach them and say, yes, there's someone has been arrested. He will be appearing in court, but he won't be appearing until 2:15. That silenced them all. How do you fill the time between 9 o'clock in the morning and 2:15 when you're waiting to see the person that allegedly killed your family? They were at a loss. They didn't know what they were going to do with themselves.
Well, Sean, I can't imagine that. I mean, you got there this morning and they were distraught. They were, agitated, all those things, confused, all those things. Now you've gone in, come out. Now they're being told you now have to wait. I can't imagine what that's like.
So they thanked me. And they said, we're going to try to figure out what we're going to do from here. And I thought, well, I'll ask the question. While you're trying to figure that out, is there anything you can tell me about her? Is there anything you can tell me about the kids? And note the use of the word her there. Note the use of the word the kids. Aboriginal culture says that you shouldn't name the dead. And I didn't want to breach that. I wanted to make sure that I was using what they call avoidance speech. If you want to tell me a name, that's fine, but I'm not going to seek one out. I'm going to ask for information instead in the most respectful manner that I can. They thought about it for a minute, had a discussion amongst themselves, and came back to me and said, look, we're not really comfortable talking about her, and we're not really comfortable talking about the kids. But why don't you come back with us to the house and talk to her mum?
Sean, so at this point, you've come out of the courthouse and they've said, why don't you come back and meet her mother? Talk me through this. What happens from here?
I've never had an offer like that before at this point in a court case.
So this is something unique. You've not been invited back.
Completely unprecedented for me. So as we get back in the car, the photographer and I, and start driving toward the location, all sorts of things are running through my head. First of all, I'm wondering why.
Okay.
Why a family in this much grief would invite journalists into their home at this point. Normally, journalists are the last person you want anywhere near you when you're grieving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, door knocks, as they call them in the industry, are a horrible job because people are going to slam doors in your faces and you're impinging upon their privacy.
Yep.
Yet here we are being invited back. Part of me worried that maybe we were taking advantage of their grief.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe by getting that information out of court and bringing it out to them, I'd somehow triggered something in them where they thought they owed me this, and I really didn't want to do that.
Sure.
And I was also thinking about safety because, as we said, these people were hysterical with their grief.
Yeah.
No disrespect intended. You don't know what people are going to do when they're in that circumstance.
course.
So my head was on a swivel. The alarms were on, trying to make sure that this was going to be conducted ethically, safely, and responsibly.
Yep.
We got to the house, which was in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, not that far away from the Elizabeth Magistrates Court, waited at the driveway, and a woman came out of the house. Short woman, hunched over, long greying hair, very dark eyes, very sad eyes. And she came over and she said, "Oh, you're the guy from the newspaper." And I said, "Yes, I am." And I introduced myself, and she looked at me for a moment and she went, "Are you related to," and she gave a name. It's one of my cousins. And I said, yes, I am. She said, "Oh, he was in jail with my eldest boy." And I said, "Well, then your eldest boy must be Robert. You must be the Rigney family." And she said, "Yes, that's right. We're the Rigneys. I'm Donna." How's that?
Okay.
My cousin had done jail time with her eldest boy. What a bizarre connection to just have pop up in the middle of this already surreal kind of day, this surreal moment.
Yeah.
And that, I think, triggered a connection. Because the next thing Donna said was she turned around to her kids and said, "Go get some chairs. Bring some chairs out. We're all going to sit down and have a chat."
So this is, as you said, this is a real connection moment, which, let me ask you, how did this help? Do you think this connection would have been made otherwise?
It would have been a lot harder to make.
Sure.
It would have taken a lot more explanation, a lot more conversation. But this was an instant, "No, you're okay to sit down and talk to because your cousin and my son went to jail together and they looked after each other in prison. So therefore, I'll talk to you."
So it was almost an extension of trust because of that process.
Very much so. You know,
Okay.
I know who your cousin is, therefore I know who your family are, therefore I know you must be okay.
Okay. Excellent.
So the chairs were all set up and we sat down under the porch and in the front yard of this house in the northern suburbs and had a conversation about death. And that's when Donna said to me, you know, "Do you know anything yet about what happened to my Yvette?"
Hang on. So Yvette. So
Yvette.
This is the first. So this is the first time we have a name.
This is the first time I had a name, and I pressed her on that a little bit, and she explained that her daughter's name was Adeline Yvette Wilson Rigney,
Okay.
but the family referred to her as Yvette Rigney.
Right. Which we will continue from here. We'll continue to refer to her as Yvette.
Yvette.
Sure.
What happened to my Yvette? What happened to Corey? What happened to Amber?
We now have names.
We now have names. I know who the grandchildren are.
Okay.
And I said, "Well, look, I don't know yet. I don't know an awful lot yet. What I do know is, you know, someone's going to appear in court this afternoon.
Okay.
What are you able to tell me about Yvette and Corey and Amber?"
Yeah.
And she said to me, "Well, Yvette, she was beautiful. She was so beautiful. The human feeling, the emotion is, I want revenge, but I can't do that. It's in the good Lord's hands. They're all in the good Lord's hands. We've got God, and he will sort this out, and the devil will take care of his own."
Pretty strong words.
Very, very strong words. She said, "I just never thought it would end like this. I asked her about Amber and Corey because, of course,
Okay.
little kids, you want to know what they're
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
She said, oh, they were happy children. What did they like to do, Donna? They loved to do anything.
Okay.
Okay, and what were they like to be around? Well, they were always full of laughter. Okay, that
Sure.
makes sense.
Okay. Kids.
Then she said to me, what do you know about the person who's been arrested? And I said, well, I know his name. His name is Stephen Graham Pete. And Donna said, oh, that was her boyfriend. But he wasn't Amber and Corey's father. So there's another piece of the puzzle right there. Who was this man that was in the house? Was it a stranger danger attack?
Mm-hmm.
Was it an old relationship? Nope, this was the current boyfriend.
Okay.
And I said, how well did you know this guy? Not very well at all. Had very limited interaction with him, Donna explained. Didn't think they'd been together for very long. Donna said maybe 6 or 8 weeks they'd been together.
Okay.
And at the same time, I'm attributing all of this to Donna, but this is a conversation with a large group of family members because Donna's brother Peter, her sister Wendy, her other daughter Juanita, and her cousin Latoya were all there as well.
Okay.
So they're all talking together, giving bits of information.
So we're starting to accumulate little pieces of information from the group, if you like, and we're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together or weave that tapestry. So this is how you were actually finding out information at this stage, which, as we said, this is probably a little bit different to how you would normally find information out, which is generally from
court documents,
yeah.
listening to a prosecutor say it in court. I've had cases where I've not known the names of the alleged victims until the day of trial.
Right. Okay.
Because the information just simply doesn't come out.
So to hear it from family members is a very different situation.
For me, yes. I'm sure there are other reporters that work in police rounds
Okay.
or in other sorts of journalism
Okay.
that do have this sort of information and this experience. But for me, this is pretty much a first-time thing.
So you've now got some information, the names of our victims, and you've started to get some information about Stephen Pete. You've shared some, and Donna started to give some back.
Yeah, and what Donna said next was, my daughter was a fighter. She wouldn't have gone down without a fight. That really struck home for me because that made me think, all right, this is potentially a domestic violence case.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing we're talking about here, intimate violence, partner violence.
Yeah.
To make a comment like that, my daughter wouldn't have gone down without a fight. Instantly, I'm thinking this mother is concerned that her daughter was suffering under some form of DV.
Or was certainly in a situation that was a potential DV or domestic violence sort of circumstance. Okay.
Given that, I thought the next thing to do was to say to Donna, well, do you have any photos of the family that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yep.
And that's going to sound cold to a lot of people. I can hear people going off, oh, right, so that's the photo you need to put on your front page story. Okay, yes. Fair. That is part of all this. I'm still a journalist. I'm still doing my job. But think about what we're doing at the same time, trying to find photos of Steve and Pete on Facebook. People put all sorts of photos up on Facebook of themselves. If you died tomorrow, would you want that photo on Facebook to be the photo that everybody remembered you by? Just think about that for a minute. Is that really the photo you would want? Because a journalist can get that. Facebook's fairly public.
Yeah.
So I believe that you should say to the family of a victim, what photo do you want shared to represent them?
Absolutely.
We talked in our last series about Jack Hanley. The photo of Jack that we used all the way through that case was the photo that Julie Kelvin provided and said, this is the one I'd prefer you use. So Donna went inside and came back out with a frame of photographs.
Okay.
One of those wooden frames like with the word love sculpted into the top of it, lots of different photos. And as my photographer's using his camera to take photos of those photos, Donna explained to me, I've got a lot of beautiful memories. Yvette gave me photos of the kids on Mother's Day, and that was the last thing I got off of her, indicating this photo frame. And she said, but she gave it to my youngest daughter to give to me because she didn't want to come to my house. I know she loved me. I know she knew I loved her, and I did love her. But things in life don't always turn out the way you want them to.
Sean, talk me through what you're starting to think here, because from what you've just said to me, if it's a Mother's Day gift, but it's been given to another family member to pass on and things hadn't got, this is not necessarily sounding like the most harmonious of relationships.
Yeah, you're starting to get that picture there of there's some disconnect here at the very least. And I said to her, well, Donna, what do you mean by that? I don't want to assume or put that into words. You tell me what that means so that I report it properly. And what she said was, well, we haven't really seen Yvette since January, and that's due to all the ups and downs Yvette's been dealing with right now. Well, what do you mean by that, Donna? What are these ups and downs? She said, well, it was bad. Crap.
Yep.
I just wish things would have changed, but they didn't. Well, okay, what sort of things,
Yeah.
Donna? Well, my daughter got mixed up with the wrong crowd, with drugs and with ice. You try to keep your face fairly neutral, but you hear ice,
Yeah.
and there's a reaction inside
absolutely
yourself.
there
I
is,
saw
yeah.
it pass across your face a
absolutely,
moment there.
I had the exact reaction.
Because, again, as we've said on this show, we don't judge people for their
Not at all.
drug use, but ice, come on, meth,
I'm not judging for the use of it. I'm I guess cringing at
the
knowing
implications.
just the effects of what that drug does.
That's right. And she said very quickly, people are going to judge Yvette based on that and how she looks. But I don't care what they think. She was a beautiful lady who looked after her children and always made sure they were right. Despite her addictions, despite her habit, she always put her kids first and made sure they had food and were loved. Now, that was really specific.
Yeah.
That was really specific, and it came out of nowhere. It's not like I had asked a follow-up question. This was information that was volunteered very quickly and very forcefully.
Yeah, this is interesting, Sean, because as you said, this is now information that we clearly didn't have before and wouldn't necessarily have been part of the investigation at this stage. This is information that's been freely given to you by a family member. What are you doing? What are you thinking? What's going on here for you?
You approach every situation like this when you're talking to a victim's family member as the victim being blameless. In the same way you put aside your bias
Yeah.
about alleged offenders and
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
assume they did anything,
course.
you also don't assume the victim did anything either.
Yeah,
This is a tragedy at this moment.
absolutely.
It's yet to be determined if it's a crime and who's responsible for that crime.
Right.
So to have the mother of a victim come out strongly, preemptively defending her daughter's reputation and with such specificity,
Yeah.
I was concerned. I was honestly, legitimately concerned, and I thought this is something I need to take back to the newsroom
Yep.
and have a discussion.
So how does that happen?
So that's getting on the phone. You finish the interview, you thank them very much, you say, I'll see you at court at 2:15. I'm going to go, write a story. Because journalism's still going. I'm not the only reporter working on this. I'm the only reporter at the Advertiser that's at court, but we've got other reporters who are going to the school where we knew the children had gone, even though we didn't know their names yet. We've got reporters out at the farmhouse at Hillier keeping an eye on what the police are doing. We've got reporters in the city at the police station listening for any public announcements that are going to be made for any press conferences. So I get back in the car and I ring the newsroom and I say, these are the names. I've got them confirmed. You can add them to the story because, of course, the story's updating constantly on the Advertiser website.
Mm-hmm.
The photographer's got photos. He's sending them through. You can use them. We have the family's permission. Please make sure you note in the story that we have the family's permission to name them and show them. By the way, has anybody heard anything about drug use? Because that's just been thrown at me by the mother. So the same crew who are busy digging through data back at the office to find Facebook photos to try to find the name Stephen Graham Pete that matches up with those tattoos are like, right, we'll get on that as well. And so the data mining begins and the phone calls start. But I can't worry about that right now. I've got to use my phone to write up the interview that I've got with Donna, send it through so that they can use it on the internet, and get back to court for 2:15 for Stephen Graham Pete's first court appearance.
Sean, the next piece of this is you have now left the Rigney residence and you're back on your way to the courthouse for the hearing, finally, of Pete in the afternoon. And you've just received some pretty, some really interesting information there. You've heard that there's potentially drug use. You've heard Donna, the victim's mother, say that she wouldn't have gone down without a fight. Some pretty powerful emotive and information that you hadn't been anticipating beforehand. What's going on for you at this point?
What's echoing in my head right now is the very final thing Donna said to me as we left the house, which was, Yvette was beautiful, but she got into drugs. There were a couple of times I wanted to take the children from her. I never did it because it was her life, and she always made sure they were fed and safe. She'd never put her drugs before her kids. People in this world judge others by how they look, and I don't care what anyone says or thinks. She was a good mum despite her habits. So I'm thinking all about that. I'm thinking about the fact that Pete was, allegedly at this stage, alleged by the family, the boyfriend.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, taking kids away, this is This is getting ugly.
This is
And that's a heck of a thing to say about a triple murder. Now it's getting ugly.
I was just about to say, this is no longer just a horrific incident of 3 people being murdered. There's so much more information you're picking up which isn't even coming out through the court process.
That's right. This shows you how much the court process really narrows things down, doesn't it? Because there's always this broader context happening around it.
Yeah.
So we get back to court.
Yep.
Pete's called on. From memory, it wasn't at 2:15. We had to wait several hours before he was even brought in. He's brought in wearing that same blue jumpsuit.
Yep.
Hood's down. Yep. I can see there's the neck tattoos, which, as we said, I needed to see to confirm that I'm looking at the right guy.
Gotcha.
The guy we got in the photograph is the guy that they arrested for it. His lawyer, Andrew English, said, we're not going to be seeking bail.
Okay.
And Pete was remanded in custody until the following August. But as Pete left court, I noticed something. And by this point, there were other journos in the courtroom as well, and I turned to them and said, did he have black eyes? And they all said, yeah, we thought so too. Visible bruising, not just under one eye, but under both eyes.
Okay. So do we know what that is at this stage?
At that stage, we had no idea.
About?
I mean, you think a silly thing like, oh, maybe somebody's tuned him up for killing a couple of kids. He spent the night in custody. Someone else has said, how dare you, bang, bang.
Yeah.
But you wonder.
Okay.
There's no point speculating in the press and saying any more than he had 2 black eyes. And you didn't even, as I said, I didn't even write 2 black eyes. I'll tell you exactly what I wrote. Still wearing the same blue police-issue jumpsuit he was given upon his arrest, Pete appeared dishevelled as he was led into court from the holding cells. He looked up only once, showing visible bruising under each of his eyes.
Okay.
Now, it's deliberately broad language because we don't want to assume anything. We don't want to assert anything at this time.
Okay.
But that's an accurate description of what he looked like in court.
Yep.
So I leave court.
So just to recap, we finally have a hearing. He makes an appearance. We're not going to seek bail. He's adjourned until August.
That's it. All over.
So how long does this process take?
30 seconds, a minute.
All that waiting around, even if the grieving family had have waited around for this process, they'd have got 60 seconds of visibility and that's it.
That's right. There's no closure. There's no real feeling involved. It is, I don't want to say perfunctory. It's procedural.
Absolutely procedural.
Absolutely procedural. So speaking of procedural, I think to myself, all right, I'm going to apply for the court file.
Makes sense.
I want to see the documentation because just because it wasn't said in court doesn't mean there isn't more information there to be had.
Okay.
I stopped by the Elizabeth Magistrates Court Registry, which is on the way out, fill out a form, leave it there. I'll get the court file whenever the court file is available, assuming the magistrate's prepared to release it to me. Yeah. And I get on the phone and I ring work and I say, he's been through, it's all done, this is what happened, these are the words you need to add to the story. Great, fantastic, no worries. Hey, listen, about that other thing. What other thing? Well, we've had a bunch of reporters come back from the school. And families at the school are saying that the family was being looked at by child services at the time. This is really, really confronting. And I'm like, okay, what else do we have? Yeah. Well, our political reporters have been in touch with Families SA. Now, wherever you are in the world listening to this, you'll have your own version of the Child Welfare Department or the Child Services Department. In South Australia at the time, ours was referred to as Families SA. We've had the reporters in touch with Families SA. They've confirmed that they were aware of the family and were in contact with the family, but won't say any more than that.
Okay. So at that point, this case in the last 24 hours has taken on an incredibly different look and feel from when you first were advised of it.
It's gone from being an undeniably tragic death, alleged murder of 3 people in a remote farmhouse near where I grew up, to having family strife, domestic violence, drugs, and now child welfare issues all rolled into it.
And all you've told me about this up to this point is you are now going to get some information that was going to take this case in a completely new and very unexpected direction.
Yeah, personally. Because that's when I started looking at all the information in front of me and all the data and trying to figure out how I could give it to another reporter and get off this case as quickly as possible.
Sean, I've never known you to actively or knowingly or want to hand off another case once you've started it. So I guess with that in mind, I need to ask you, you've just received this information, these court documents, but why exactly is it that you wanted to or needed to hand off this case to someone else?
I was not ready to go another round with the concept of neglected children. I was not ready to go another round with the concept of family matters leaving kids in a place where they could die as a result of what was going on to them. And I was not ready to go another round with the trauma that I hadn't fully recovered from yet. And I honestly didn't know that I was actually going to be capable of doing this one without breaking myself again.
So with that, within 24 hours, you've gone from one end of a spectrum to another that you had no anticipation there was even a spectrum of. You found yourself back in a situation that we discussed right at the start of this episode that once upon a time put you in a psychologist's chair. You've just said you were trying to find a way, an idea, how can I put this together to give to someone else? How did you end that day?
I ended that day sitting in the registry of the Elizabeth Magistrates Court, having received that phone call saying that there was a family's SA connection, waiting to see whether the doors of the Elizabeth Magistrates Court were going to close and I was going to be kicked out, or whether I was going to get that court file that I'd applied for before the end of the day. I had my notebook to one side of me, my bag to the other. I just had my head in my hands and my elbows on my knees, just stuck in that moment. And part of me was saying, if you get kicked out tonight before you get that court file, that's the sign that you have to hand this on to somebody else. But if you get that court file before those doors close, this is yours, whether you like it or not.
The fact that we're sitting here today, the fact that we're talking about this and you wrote the article on this, I can only ascertain that you received that file before those doors closed.
4:50 p.m. on that Tuesday, the registry staff called over to me and said, "Oh, we've got your file ready." I walked in, I sat down. You can't keep photocopies of the file. You have to sit there and take notes. You've only got 10 minutes. We're going to close in 10 minutes. You have to get your notes and get out. Okay. So I start taking notes. And the very first document that I saw in that court file told me why Stephen Graham Pete had 2 black eyes when he appeared in court that day.
And for that, we'll return to this story next week. Sean, I just want to say thank you to you personally before we go much further with this. I can tell how much of an emotional drain and how deep this is running within you. For those who obviously don't have the benefit that I do to sit in this studio and watch you relive this, I can honestly tell you this is visibly moving, Sean, in a way I've very rarely ever seen. So I do want to say thank you for going through this, Sean.
Thank you for guiding me through it, Daniel. Honestly, this is why we're doing this show together, because there's nobody else that I would say these things to. And thank you to all you listeners out there for going through it with me. I really got to strongly urge all of you. We gave you those numbers at the top of the broadcast. Please don't be afraid to reach out. Please don't be afraid to use them. There is nothing weak about vulnerability.
And those numbers were Victim Support Service on 8231 5626 or 1800 182 368. Domestic Violence Crisis Service on 1300 782 200. Domestic Violence Gateway Service on 1800 800 098. And the National Sexual Assault, Domestic and Family Violence Counselling Service on 1800 RESPECT. Next episode, we're going to look more into what was in that court file and how did Pete receive those black eyes that Sean referred to. The reports from Families SA about a vet, her living conditions and her children. We'll get Donna Rigby's response to those claims. We'll get more about a vet's background and even more revelations about her children. And also, the fact that Families SA were at the Hillier premises on the day of the murders. Plenty to look forward to. It's going to be a heck of a ride, as I mentioned. Until then, a huge thank you to all of our fans and followers, anyone who's listened to us across the airwaves with 5AA or via our podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Thank you so much to those who have gone in, rated, reviewed, left some feedback for us. We greatly appreciate that. We would love so many more of you to be able to do that for us across, as I said, Spotify or iTunes. If you're looking to leave feedback and let us know what you think, please, you can do that as well on our social platforms. That, of course, is at Just Lawful Podcast on Facebook and Instagram and at Just Lawful Pod on Twitter. You can, of course, keep up to date with all of Adelaide's true crime with Sean's work in the Advertiser, and you can follow him at Sean Fuster on both Facebook and Instagram. Until next time when we pick this story back up, we just want to remind you once again, please enjoy our work, don't become our work, and we'll speak to you on the next episode of Just Lawful.